Hello, everyone. In the spirit of International Women's Month, I'd like you to take a minute to talk about Virginia Woolf today. So, how many of you have heard of Virginia Woolf before? Have you ever heard the name? Is she familiar to you at all? Have you ever heard about her? If not, well, you've certainly heard about her today. First, let's talk about some facts about her life. You see a picture of her. She had very distinctive features in her face. A lot of people would say she wasn't pretty, but beauty is a very subjective concept. And to many people, she might have seemed gorgeous. Who knows? So on this page, biography.com, you have a variety of different personalities portrayed. Biography.com, if you're interested in reading further into this. In some of my other English classes, I'm also doing International Women's Month, and we are talking about different personalities from all over the world in our classes. We did a little bit about Virginia Woolf with a different group, and they did a tremendous job finding different facts about her and finding summaries of her books. They might even read one of them now that they've learned about her. So let's get to some of the facts. Virginia Woolf was English and she wrote modernist classics, Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse, as well as pioneering feminist texts. Feminist texts such as A Room of One's Own and Three Guineas. Some of you who like film and who are interested in cinema, it is very possible that you have heard of a movie named The Hours. It is not from your time. Let me just The Hours. Definitely not from your time. The Hours was a movie that was made in 2002. It came to cinemas everywhere in 2002. Nicole Kidman played Virginia Woolf in this movie. The Hours, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it for you in case you want to watch it. The Hours had a cast of stars in it. Nicole Kidman was in it, Julianne Moore, and Meryl Streep. You know Meryl Streep, everybody knows who she is, or everybody who likes cinema and who is interested in cinema knows who she is. Because of that, a lot of attention was drawn to Virginia Woolf because of this movie. So many people who had never heard of her took an interest in her life and wanted to learn more about her. The Hours has a very interesting language of cinema, if you will, and it tells different stories that connect somehow. I can't tell you too much of it. But what I can tell you is that the life of Virginia Woolf is portrayed in this movie. Of course, it is a piece of fiction, so some of the aspects of her life that are presented in The Hours is not presented exactly as they happened. But that's just a tip. If you want to, you can watch this movie. It's a very interesting piece of cinema. But let's get back to the facts about Virginia Woolf. Who was Virginia Woolf? Born into a privileged English household in 1882, author Virginia Woolf was raised by free-thinking parents. She began writing as a young girl and published her first novel, The Voyage Out, in 1915. She wrote modernist classics including Mrs. Dalloway, To the Lighthouse, and Orlando. Listen, you guys, Orlando was way ahead of its time. When you think of Orlando, I really get chills to think of how ahead of her times Virginia Woolf was for writing a novel like Orlando. I don't, again, I don't want to spoil anything for you in case you decide to read the novel at some point. But gender is one of the aspects of this book that is approached in a very out there kind of way. And let me tell you why. There is a lot of talk about gender nowadays, how people transition and how important it is for them to live their authentic self and express themselves the way they feel best and match the gender of their body to the gender of their mind and heart. But in Orlando, basically one day the character wakes up a different gender. I'm not going to tell you so much more about this, but Orlando was written decades and decades ago, and now the theme is still very relevant, probably more than ever, because there is a gender revolution going on, and there are so many different views about gender. So it would be interesting to see how certain people who have a passion about the topic, how they would feel about the novel. But back to her biography. In her personal life, she suffered bouts of deep depression. She committed suicide in 1941 at the age of 59. So she was really young when she died. And often enough, I hear people talk about the issue of suicide that can be very triggering for many people. And in her life, there are people who say they could see it coming because of the type of life she led and her tribulations and the problems that she had. But by the same token, there are people who seem perfectly happy, who have everything, and they still end up committing suicide. So that's rather difficult to pinpoint. And it is a very sad situation when you think that a brilliant mind like Virginia Woolf was lost to suicide. She left behind a legacy of fantastic novels. So her early life. She was born on January 25th, 1882. Her name was Adeline Virginia Stephen. She was raised in a remarkable household. Her father, Sir Leslie Stephen, was a historian and author, as well as one of the most prominent figures in the golden age of mountaineering. Woolf's mother, Julia Prinsep, Stephen née Jackson, had been born in India and later served as a model for several pre-Raphaelite painters. So if you look at, I'm going to show you some pictures. so that you know what that means. If you look at the pictures, you see that the women depicted in pre-Raphaelite art, they have a very ethereal quality to them. And you see a lot of women with red hair, with a type of beauty, with porcelain skin. So if you can picture her mother based off of this, then you can have an idea of what she looked like. So the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood was a group of English painters, poets, and art critics founded in 1848 by William Holman Hunt, John Everett Millais, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, William Michael Rossetti. You can read the whole list. This entry is actually accurate. I'm not 100%. I don't trust Wikipedia 100%, but this entry is very accurate. So you can look at it later if you want. There are a lot of different concepts and notions that the period explores. You can go and read into it. But that's what Virginia Woolf's mother did for a while. She served as a model. So she came from an educated family. She came from a background that gave her all of the elements to become as great as she became. So I want to talk about something that is very specific. Her legacy, the legacy that she left. It would be really nice if your class, as a group at some point this year, read one of the novels, maybe Mrs. Dalloway. It's a shorter novel, but it's incredibly rich. So, one of the things that Virginia Woolf is very famous for is stream of consciousness. She was a master of this type of writing. If you think of stream of consciousness, it is exactly as the title describes. Think of a stream and think of everything that goes through your head when you're conscious, when you're awake, when you're thinking. It is about your thought process put on paper without any filter. Virginia Woolf was one of the absolute masters at it. Here's something that Virginia Woolf said. Life is not a series of gig lamps symmetrically arranged. Life is a luminous halo, a semi-transparent envelope surrounding us from the beginning of consciousness to the end. And I love how she puts this, because life is not like a movie or a soap opera where there is a beginning and there's a build-up, a critical incident, and then a conclusion with an end. And nothing is linearly and symmetrically arranged. You have ups and downs. You may have a vast majority of amazing moments with a few sad moments here and there. Maybe no critical incidents. You can lead a life without any outrageous occurrences in it. But you may also have a life where every day is an event, but it's not symmetrically arranged. I just think she's a fantastic author, and this is why we're honoring her today. We will do other personalities and different women from all over the world and from different walks of life. I chose a woman from literature because I feel that literature is a passion of mine, so I chose to start there. But of course, we will be talking about women in science, women in film, women in sports. Lots of women have done remarkably well in sports. But today we're talking about Virginia Woolf. And I want you to really think about whether maybe you would want to read one of her books, maybe Orlando, maybe Mrs. Dalloway. Those books, I read them a long time ago. I want to read them again myself. It would be nice for us to do this. She is one of the greatest in British literature, which is, I don't think that we do enough of it in school. In different countries, literature is a subject of its own. Here in Norway, literature is a part of your language program. So even when you have Norwegian classes, you have Norwegian, and within Norwegian, you have literature, Norwegian literature. Yes, I promised this wasn't going to be a long video. I said something along the lines of 20 minutes. So I'd like you to write a paragraph about what I talked about here today. So feel free to go to biography.com if you don't remember everything that I've just said and you want to have an outline for you to base your paragraph on. But try to write off the top of your head after watching the video. That's always best. Those of you who chose to do the exercises, you will realize that I'm not sure why I'm saying this, because if people chose to do the exercises, it means they didn't watch the video. But just in case somebody decided to do the exercise and watched this video, you will notice that you have read part of those texts. You haven't read the whole thing in class, but you've read some of it. So I'm going to have you read and then hand in the questions. And those of you who are watching this, just write a paragraph. A paragraph, a good one, has to have between 10 and 12 sentences. It has to have a topic sentence that might be at the very beginning or somewhere in that paragraph. Usually people put it at the very beginning, but it can be anywhere in that paragraph, telling the reader what your paragraph is about. And it has to be concise. It has to really contain sentences. Remember, a sentence is a complete unit of thought, must have a subject and a verb minimum to be considered a sentence. So by this time when you're watching this, I will either be sitting there still doing my Norwegian exam, or I will have finished it. My goal is to get B1 level on this one, and then I can get B2 level on the next one and C1 on the other one that I'm going to take. I already have competency and proficiency in Norwegian, but everybody who took these exams prior to 2009 is welcome to retake them, so I'm retaking them. Have a great rest of your day. Remember, those of you who still haven't handed in some of your work from previous weeks, you watched a documentary called The Rachel Divide. You watched an interview with NAACP leader Dr. Jasmine Young, and you were supposed to write about these two things. You were supposed to write about the documentary, about cultural appropriation, about your opinions about the matter. Do you think that Rachel Dolezal was the person for that job? Why or why not? Did she do anything wrong? It's all about what you see in this. And then in the interview, you will see somebody who took on that leadership. Dr. Jasmine Young took that leadership, and she explains different details about what that organization is, the NAACP. So you can write about that. Some of you have already handed this in, some of you haven't. So remember, you have to hand in everything. Even if you hand it in a little late, it's still better than not handing in everything. Have a nice rest of your day.